Welcome to Down and Scaled Replicas, where modeling is fun! Yay! Well, that's my philosophy, that modeling should be fun. I'm not a rivet counter, at least in most instances. And for me, finding a project that's just a joy to put together, low pressure, no stress, that is really the ideal. And that's what this Atlantis' Convair Space Shuttlecraft is ending up being. It's just a fun little kit. It's going together well, and with this update you're going to see some of the first test 3D prints of additional details that I'm just putting together, again for fun, just to kind of punch up the model and enhance it a little bit. And we'll walk through some of the ups and downs of 3D printing and designing these parts. In addition, I promised you last time that we would begin a new project in parallel with the Space Shuttlecraft, and indeed we're going to begin that. It's a new product for Down and Scaled Replicas. It is a conversion set for Bronco's 1/48 scale Predator A UAV. What it's going to do is it's going to take you from Predator A to their Predator XP, and we'll get into those details here in a moment. But in the meantime, if you're enjoying this, I really would appreciate it if you click subscribe here and follow me here on the channel. And we'll just keep doing these videos for as long as there's interest in doing them. So let's just get on with it and start having fun. So what a blast with this Convair Space Shuttlecraft. Just no pressure, just something to have fun with. And I'm punching up the detail in a few areas, like I mentioned last time, with some 3D printed parts that I'm designing. Here's a few of the first ones that have come off the printer. And here's one example, the aft end of the fuel tank that attaches to the shuttle. And let's take a look at this bulkhead here, because one of the things that still makes 3D printing as much of an art as a science is what we're seeing here. See that bottom edge that's supposed to be straight there, but it has some rounding at the corners? So there's a few things here that I will do to help remedy this and to keep that straight as it comes off the printer. First of all, oftentimes what I'll do is I will design in a sacrificial edge or a rim, whatever you want to call it, where deformation may show up in the print and it can therefore be removed and the rest of the part should be okay. What I'll also do is when I put it on the build plate, I'll angle it slightly so that one of the edges starts first and the other edge follows, and then be sure that that first edge really gets some strong supports attached to it to make sure that it really gets held onto very well by the printer as it's printing, and that will help a lot to keep that edge straight. And I'm going to get in there on some of those initial supports and change them from medium-sized supports to heavy, larger supports, meaning that the printer's really going to be hanging on to that as it prints. It should keep that part just as I designed it then, without those rounded edges. And because that sacrificial rim is going to be trimmed off, there's no issues with those supports actually blemishing the part itself. And so here is the newly printed part, and I'm first going to do just a little bit of trimming on those heavy supports down there, because my next little trick won't necessarily work on those really heavy supports down there. Get those trimmed up, just make sure those are detaching there from the rim. And now here's a trick when you're trimming a lot of supports off of a piece and they're being kind of stubborn. What I will do is I will hit them just for a few seconds with a heat gun. And what that does is that softens up those supports and hopefully not the part too much. But then it's going to make it super easy to get those supports off the part. Look at that. They just come right off of it. They clean up really nice. And they also don't leave too many blemishes on the part itself. So it helps in that respect as well. And now that I've done that, remember we've got that sacrificial rim on there. What I can do is I can trim that away. And I have just a really nice square part here. Just exactly what I was looking for. And that fits in nicely to the back end of the fuel tank there. I think it's just going to add a nice little bit of detail. There's 4 engines that are going to be mounted on there as well too, so I'm liking the way that looks. A more complex part I'm designing is a cargo bay for the shuttle, and it has to not only angle in on the sides there, but it also has to fit into the back end of the shuttle, slide in, and then fit into the front end of the shuttle as well too. And this is just a test piece as we go along to kind of check dimensions here. You can see in front I'm just trying to check to see what the height is that has to fit in front there. I'm checking the angles on the left and right hand sides there. And so here's another piece like 3 test pieces later where I think I finally have got the final dimensions the way that I want them here. Plus you can see I put a little bit of detail into that cargo bay as well too. Slides nicely into the plastic parts. And then the back end fits on there pretty well. There's going to be a little bit of filling and sanding that needs to be done there. But otherwise, I think that this is just about the way I'm going to like having that cargo bay. Here's another fun little part for the aft end of the shuttlecraft itself. I had to trim a little part off of the base or the floor of the plastic part. You can see there. And then the replacement 3D printed part just slides into the aft end there, and it's going to have 2 engine bells mounted in it. You can see I've got kind of this funky flap thing there on the bottom going like you see on the actual Space Shuttle, and it's just going to be a fun little detail to put into the aft end of that to add a little bit more visual interest to the model. So let's turn and take a look at the booster, or the rocket itself. And the aft end of the rocket is going to have a few engine bells on it, and I've designed this little piece here to fit on the bottom of the plastic kit part. And here again, I'm just showing my process for removing the supports on this. I'm going to heat them up just a little bit here, and that means that this will twist off of there really easy. Take those supports off really easy. Yeah, just give it a little twist there and they come off just as clean as can be. A little bit of sanding to clean that up, otherwise looks really good. So here are the parts that are going to go into the booster. So on the aft end or the bottom end of that booster is going to be a bulkhead, and you can see my thought process for how the 4 engine bells are going to attach to that then. And then around that is going to be that structural support area that we just removed from the printing supports. And that's going to slide into the bottom or the aft end of the booster just about like this. And it's printed in 2 parts because it's going to make painting a little bit easier for that, and you'll see how that comes along before too long. Now on the top end or the front end of that booster, this is just a test piece. It just doesn't quite fit in there yet. I've got a little bit more design work to do on that, but the test piece shows you the front end of that fuel tank and the surrounding structure that's going to be a detail there on the front end of the booster. And one last thing before we wrap up here is I'm trying to show the difference between the test parts shown in the light gray on the left here and the final parts in the darker gray on the right. And I'm not sure it's showing up, but there is a difference in the quality of the 3D print between the 2 parts. The light gray is printed at a lower resolution, so it prints more quickly. It's using a less expensive resin that doesn't necessarily capture all of the same details that the darker gray resin will capture, but they're just there to check the fit of the parts and does the part generally look the way that I want it to look. Once I've got it into its final form, I will print it at a higher resolution using a darker gray resin. That darker pigment will capture more of the details from the 3D printer and will ultimately be the parts that I want to use in the final product. Here's the other project that's on the workbench right now, and it is Bronco's 1/48 scale Predator, and this can be built either as the unarmed recon version, the RQ-1, or as a version armed with Hellfire missiles, which is the MQ-1. A while back, I wrapped up a large client build. It took a long time to finish up, and I was really burned out, so I needed to get my modeling mojo back. I grabbed the Bronco kit as a quick build. It ended up taking a little bit longer than I had anticipated. It's not anything because of the kit itself, but I was just really burned out, so it took a while to get back to the workbench. But it turned out to be a great little kit and a really nice segue into a new conversion project, which I can now make available on my website. The General Atomics Predator was first developed in the mid-1990s, and the system has been operated primarily by the U.S. Air Force and the CIA. It was first deployed to the Balkans during the Yugoslav Wars in 1995, and they eventually found their way to Iraq and Afghanistan in the early 2000s. So the original system designation was RQ-1 Predator, where the R is the US DoD designation for reconnaissance, and Q refers to an unmanned aircraft system. In 2002, the US Air Force changed the designation to MQ-1, where M indicates airframes capable of carrying and deploying ordnance such as the Hellfire missiles shown in this photo. The Predator XP is an upgraded version of the Predator that's been licensed by the US government for export, particularly to countries, for example, in the Middle East and Latin America, which might not be able to purchase the armed version. It's been designed specifically to be unable to carry weapons. The XP has upgraded avionics, an automatic takeoff and landing system, but one of the primary external differences from the baseline Predator are the winglets, which help to extend its endurance to 35 hours. Sources indicate that the United Arab Emirates Air Force was the first customer for the Predator XP, with an unspecified number that have already been delivered between 2016 and 17. Given that potted history, let's take a look at the conversion sets, and there are actually two. First is a simple drop-in wing replacement set for the version that's intended to be displayed on the ground. And then there's an equally simple drop-in wing replacement, but with deflected wings, plus representations of retracted landing gear for an in-flight version. For the on-ground version, you get a wing set that's been 3D printed in a white, rigid resin that will not droop over time. You'll be getting two sets of winglets because those can be a bit delicate, and you'll get backups then just in case one gets broken. Plus extra antennae that are seen in various photos, and you'll need to refer to your own references to determine which antennas that you'll need for your version of the aircraft. For the in-flight version, you get all of that, plus a representation of retracted landing gear, a display base, and templates for drilling a hole in the bottom of the model kit fuselage for the brass rod that will fit the display base. The wings for each set are securely shipped in specially cut foam holders to prevent damage during shipping. And we'll start by pulling out the on-ground wings just to run through the installation of those wings. I find it handy to just grab a pair of tweezers to pull those guys out of the shipping container. And details such as control surface hinges and actuator fairings, those are all included in the 3D printed wings. The wings install in exactly the same way as the kit wings. There are tabs that overlap inside the fuselage, and it's a tight fit there at the wing root, just as the kit wings are a tight fit there. Just insert the top of the fuselage on top of the bottom there. Again, just make sure that that's a good tight fit in there. A little bit of adjustment. Shouldn't require much. And then that's for the on-ground version. For the in-flight wings, it's the same process. You'll see that they're deflected now, but they have the same types of tabs that are going to fit into the center of the fuselage, and the same details that are printed into the wings as well too. Now you'll note that this wing right here, it's got a tab on it. That's the housing for the brass rod that inserts into the bottom of the fuselage for displaying the model in flight. Now I'm just holding those guys onto there. Again, it's a tight fit there right at the wing root. Just like the kit wings are a tight fit. Get the top of the fuselage on here. That sandwiches those wings in there. And then that's going to be the in-flight version. I forgot to take any video, but I did take some photos showing how the template included with the in-flight version helps to locate where the 1/16 inch diameter hole needs to be drilled for mounting the brass rod into the bottom of the model. Both sets include winglets, obviously, which are the primary external features that set the XP apart from the baseline Predator. They're marked port and starboard. You're going to get two sets of these. I use a razor saw to separate these two, but first, they come printed with these protective sides, which can first be broken off. They're scored at the bottom, so they can be broken off. And then I will use a razor saw to first score along where the supports touch the winglet, and then to gently saw those supports off from the winglets. So there, okay, it's separated. So there's a little bit of cleanup that needs to be done there on the leading edge. I use just a very fine sanding stick to go over that leading edge, get the rest of that cleaned off of there. If it looks like a delicate operation, it really is, and this is why you get 2 complete sets of winglets, just in case you have problems. Once that's cleaned up then, there's a simple tab on the winglet that fits into a slot there on the wing tip itself. It should be a very good fit there. A drop of super glue or epoxy should hold that just fine. And then that is the winglet for the wing. Just a very simple fit. Really shouldn't require much cleanup there at the joint. Now in my build, I'm going to leave these off until the very end just because they are a bit delicate. I'm going to try to get the rest of the model put together and cleaned up first, and I will install the winglets just right before I begin to paint. So just one last thing for this week before we sign off. I don't like the way that housing for the camera and some of the other instrumentation has to be installed basically in step 1 before the fuselage halves are closed up. I want to do that later after I'm done painting. So there is a ring, a ridge there around the top of that housing that it fits into the bottom of the fuselage. I'm going to trim that off, and then I'm going to blank off the hole in the bottom fuselage part with just a piece of sheet styrene. And then I can install that housing from the bottom later on. And we don't want to forget, we need just a little bit of weight up front. I've got a lead fishing weight there that I'm going to epoxy into the nose of the model to keep it from being a tail sitter. Well, that's just about it for this update. Thank you again for joining me here at Down Unscaled Replicas. Next time we'll be continuing on with the Predator XP conversion sets, and we'll probably be just about ready to wrap up the Convair Space Shuttlecraft next time, which means gotta start thinking about what that next project is going to be. I don't know what that's going to be, but yeah, spend some time thinking about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. But if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel here. Visit the website. Follow me on Facebook, on Down Unscaled Replicas Facebook page, as well as on Instagram. And until next time, happy modeling.